Hello, our team is integrated by April, Richa, Kirti, and me, Edwin. In this presentation, we will be discussing themes from Tulu Tumbanan's article, Women Entrepreneurship in Asian Developing Countries, their development and main constraints. We will then review the barriers that female entrepreneurs face and discuss how globalization has affected this. In particular, we will examine case studies from Bangladesh and South Korea. We hope you enjoy this presentation. Before we start with the case study, some definitions need to be provided. In this case, globalization. Globalization is a process of interaction and integration among the people, companies, and governments of different nations, a process driven by international trade and investment and aided by information technology. Globalization has also led to economic liberalization, often through structural adjustment programs. The Americanization of the world, the expansion of information technologies, and the growth of global poverty and inequality. A simultaneous decline of the welfare state has eliminated programs and services that support the poor in many parts of the world. Also, globalization has had different impacts according to gender, class, and other aspects. While this has created some opportunities for women to participate in the market as entrepreneurs, it has also resulted in the exploitation of women and feminization and informalization of labor. A key element of globalization is the globalizing of different modes of production, resulting to a race to the bottom of the labor standards around the world. Since the male breadwinner is no longer to provide for his family, women have increasingly participated in the workforce, mostly through informal work, while at the same time they try to maintain their reproductive labor. This is supported by a preference for to use women as a cheaper and more easily exploitable workforce for global capital. On the other hand, we have the following definitions. Entrepreneurship is the process of designing, launching, and running a new business. For example, a startup company offering a product, process, or service. It has been defined as the capacity and willingness to develop, organize, and manage a business venture along with any of its risks in order to make a profit. New business can be small, medium, or large. This can be measured either by the number of employees or overall revenue. The entrepreneur is a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. Why is entrepreneurship important for women? Women's productive activities, particularly in industry, empower them economically and enable them to contribute more to overall development. Entrepreneurship is increasingly being looked to as a means of job production and a driver of overall economic growth, whether they are involved in small or medium scale production activities or in the informal or formal sectors. Women's entrepreneurial activities are not only a means for economic survival, but also have positive social repercussions for the women themselves. Female entrepreneurs increase wealth and contribute to social and economic fabric. According to Tumbanan, female entrepreneurs across Asia are outnumbered by male entrepreneurs. However, there are exceptions, such as in Thailand, where female entrepreneurs outnumber male entrepreneurs. 95% of female entrepreneurs in Asia are involved in small and medium enterprises. Many are also forced into entrepreneurship to supplement their income. These are known as being pushed instead of pulled into entrepreneurship.
Factors affecting female entrepreneurship. These are the factors which affect female entrepreneurship, from reproductive roles to access to resources, patriarchal norms, lack of institutional support. I'm going to discuss with you each points later in the slides. Gendered access to resources, lack of education, lower level of education puts women entrepreneurs in developing countries as a disadvantaged position compared to men. While gender gap in primary education has decreased in recent years, in many countries the gap remains high at secondary and tertiary education levels. Lower education does not emphasize entrepreneurship skills. It decreases the chance that women will have the knowledge needed to excel in business and thereby contribute to the country's overall economic growth. Lack of financial services. Financial institutions sometimes require high collateral from female entrepreneurs. Some banks may even require women to have male co-signers in order to open accounts. Finance is critical resources for venture creation. It is very important that women entrepreneurs have adequate knowledge and information of various financial institutions which are rendering financial incentive and many other help for women entrepreneurs in the region. Culture, religion, patriarchal norms, and traditional roles. A number of culture and religious norms create barriers for female entrepreneurs. This includes limited mobility of women based on traditional or religious norms, as well as religious prohibition against women running public business. Traditional norms and practices may vary from country to country but are often embedded with patriarchal norms that limit women's skill set and aspiration. The emphasis of women's reproductive roles result in often prevailing attitude that women's place is at home and that her first priority is to look after the home and family constraint many married women from venturing into entrepreneurship. Reproductive role. In less entrepreneurial sectors, reproductive work carried on by women are considered as an extension of domestic work. For example, 5.5 million women considered inactive were involved in food production in Latin America. Reproductive work is the care and maintenance of the household and the family. It includes bearing and caring for children, cooking, collecting water and fuel, cleaning, shopping, mending, and looking after the disabled, old, or sick members of the family. In all class and race groups, this work falls mostly on women's shoulders. Most women work long hours in and around the house, get less sleep than men, and have less time for leisure. Although even every household needs a lot of housework, it is not valued, it is not seen as real work, and it's not paid for. Most poor women work almost twice as many hours per day as their male partners. Lack of institutional support. Lack of female political leaders as role models. It is very difficult to find women role models who can inspire young women entrepreneurs. The level of corruption in a country where the policeman and the politician expect some form of money in form of bribery, which prevent women to participate in large scale of business. There are not many government support and incentives that support women entrepreneurs in many developing countries. Since women are engaged in most of non-formal enterprise and businesses, legal recognition is not provided by the government for such business. One of the major problems women entrepreneurs face is lack of training, especially catering their needs like financial management and investment. Of all the challenges, the biggest problem women entrepreneurs in some Asian countries encounter is the lack of rights to property. For example, women in Bangladesh, especially married women, do not have the rights to property which bar from owning any business independently without the men's involvement. Access to resources. Access to markets. The ability to tap into markets requires expertise, knowledge, and context. Women often lack access to training and experience in on how to participate in marketplace and are therefore unable to market goods and services strategically. Access to training. Women have limited access to vocational and technical training in South Asia. In fact, women on average have less access to education than men, and technical and vocational skills can be developed on a strong foundation of basic primary and secondary education. Access to policymakers. Most women do not have access to policymakers or representation on policy making bodies. Large companies and men can more easily influence policies and have access to it in comparison to women entrepreneurs.
Country case studies. We'll be discussing the impact of globalization on female entrepreneurship in two countries in Asia, Bangladesh and South Korea. We'll use these two case studies to examine the barriers that female entrepreneurs face in countries with varying economic wealth and growth, comparing high income to low income countries, as well as the effects of globalization on female entrepreneurship. We'll start by comparing the state of women in these two countries. For high income, we consider 12,000 or more dollars, and for low income, less than $1,000. Gender Equity Index. We selected these two countries, South Korea and Bangladesh, because despite having drastically different GDPs, they have similar rankings of education, economic activity, and empowerment levels, according to the Gender Equity Index from 2008. And you can see this information in this chart.
The above graph shows the Gender Equity Index from 2008. It was featured in our reading. We selected these two countries because South Korea and Bangladesh has drastically different GDPs, but when you look at the graph, they have similar ranking on education, economic activity, and empowerment level. Female leadership in South Korea and Bangladesh. As you can see from the picture that both have female prime ministers. This is one of the reasons why we chose these two countries for our presentation, and we would also like to see the implication on policies while having a female leader and how it has impacted female entrepreneurship and the role of women in these two countries.
The Global Gender Gap Report 2013. When looking at the gender disparity between men and women, instead of focusing on women's empowerment overall, the Global Gender Gap Report found that Bangladesh surpasses South Korea in gender equity. According to the 2013 the Global Gender Gap Report, which rates countries based on four pillars: health and survival, economic participation and opportunity, political empowerment and education, ranked Bangladesh at 75 in terms of gender equity, while South Korea ranked 111 on Global Gender Gap, 36 ranking lower. While these countries have similar rankings in terms of gender equity, Bangladesh GDP is one between 26 that of South Korea's. Bangladesh GDP is 958 per capita, while South Korea's per capita GDP is 26 times greater and 25,976 per person per year. South Korea is also the home to a number of successful conglomerates such as Samsung, Hyundai, POSCO, and LG. It's also noteworthy that another Asian country, the Philippines, was ranked number 5th overall in gender equity, above Ireland, New Zealand, Denmark, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Canada and the US. These results show that GDP, or increase in GDP, cannot be conflated with gender equity. As both of these cases illustrated, it cannot be assumed that increasing GDP will increase women's economic participation or opportunity. Instead of a concerted effort must be focused on gender equity in order to improve these statistics and in particular support for female entrepreneurship in the country. However, when looking specifically at economic participation and opportunity, the two countries perform remarkably similarly, with Bangladesh ranking 121 out of 136 countries and Korea ranking 118. Korea's low ranking dropped 3 positions. Is due to low labor force participation and lower wages for similar work. As you can see in this chart, Bangladesh and Korea's labor force participation ratio of female to male is also remarkably similar. One of the other drastic differences in terms of gender equity between the countries is in political empowerment. In this chart you can see that Bangladesh is ranking 7th and South Korea ranking 86th. As you can see, South Korea has a better political empowerment than South Korea. This is according to the Global Gender Gap Report of 2013. In this chart, you can see while Korea and Bangladesh have similar rankings of gender equity, they differ in regards to the support for female entrepreneurship. According to the Female Entrepreneurship Index, we see Korea ranks 40.1, while Bangladesh only ranks 70.9. This is because female entrepreneurs has a distinctive set of factors that promote or inhibit it, which are unique from overall female economic participation in wage labor. While women who engage in wage labor may face issues such as unequal compensation, difficulty finding a job or getting full-time position, and difficulty finding jobs with flexible hours, support dual roles as mothers, female entrepreneurs face a related but different set of challenges and benefits associated with running their own business. This can include difficulty accessing to capital to finance their firms, access to information and networks of the other entrepreneurs, and or cultural beliefs that limit a woman's own aspirations to become a business owner and take on the risks associated with starting or running their own business.
The elements that support entrepreneurship can be divided into three categories: entrepreneurial environment, entrepreneurial aspirations, and entrepreneurial ecosystems. These are true for all people. However, each of these have a gendered element that specifically affects whether female entrepreneurs are supported in starting and running businesses. In particular, the role of family and social and cultural norms inordinately affect women's ability to run businesses. The entrepreneurial environment focuses on assessing the entrepreneurial spirit and culture of a given society, as well as the presence of institutions that support female-run businesses. Most often, these are government organizations. It also includes laws which can support female entrepreneurs, as well as the overall operating environment for small and medium enterprises, since these are the firms that are most often run by women. These can be supported through structural reforms that reduce barriers to doing business, as well as to offering startup funding. The entrepreneurial ecosystem contains variables that capture the access to resources and institutions needed for female business development. This includes access to capital and microfinance, as well as acquisition of business information and networks of fellow entrepreneurs. It also includes education and training in relevant business skills. The third factor is entrepreneurial aspirations, which focus on the individual entrepreneurial character, as well as the resources available for female entrepreneurship to contribute to economic growth. Factors that address this include the presence of mentors and role models, the availability of childcare, and the level of supportiveness of a woman's family. Overall, female entrepreneurs face constraints of low levels of education, lack of capital, and cultural or religious constraints that inhibit their ability to start and run businesses. According to the Female Entrepreneurial Index, which monitored over 100 countries based on their ability to support female entrepreneurs, Bangladesh faces specific issues resulting from little money spent on research and development, low access to internet, and low labor force parity, as well as a small market. Individually, Bangladeshi female entrepreneurs are also typically less educated and do not focus on new products or exportable products, which could mitigate the small market size that they face. They also have little access to financing. However, they benefit from having higher gender equity in politics. In contrast to Bangladesh, Korea benefits from having very high research and development expenditures as a country, as well as great business freedom and movement, and high-tech absorption in the general market. However, there are few women in leadership and a low level of opportunity recognition and fast growth female business leaders. Looking at a comparison of Bangladesh and Korea, we see that both countries suffer from not being able to utilize new technologies, as well as female entrepreneurs not knowing other entrepreneurs which could support them. In both countries, there is also a great underrepresentation of women in the tech sector. We will now begin our first case study on South Korea. South Korea experienced exceptionally impressive economic growth during the second half of the 20th century. In the 1960s, it was still poor with limited social freedoms and a GDP lower than Ghana's. However, through developing protectionist industries, Korea experienced massive growth and today is one of the most economically and technologically advanced societies in the world. However, the role of women have not evolved along with the country's sudden economic growth. In 1997, Korea experienced a financial crisis that led to IMF-inflicted economic restructuring. During this period, 1 million employees, mostly male, lost their jobs or were forced into early retirement. Thousands of businesses failed, and unemployment tripled in 1 year. 10% of the employees of the 5 largest chaebol groups lost their jobs, and 1 in 5 managers was demoted or left their position. The middle class shrunk, and urban household incomes decreased by 14.4%. Many people were forced into self-employment, mostly through starting food-based businesses. And since 1999, irregular laborers have become more than half of the total active labor force, even though irregular workers earn only 60% of regular workers working the same amount of time. Before the financial crisis, South Korea had been a relatively equitable country with a large middle class due to land reform. However, this shifted as businesses mimicked American companies, offering enormous salaries to CEOs and top executives. Structural adjustments eliminated the last remnants of protectionist policies, which had been responsible for Korea's massive growth over the previous 4 decades. Western imports could now enter the market due to more relaxed trade policies and quickly became status symbols for a new upper class. The rise of this new upper echelon, coupled with massive layoffs, led to growing inequity within the country that continues today. The limited number of jobs in this period for male breadwinners, along with the cultural expectation for women to be stay-at-home moms, made it even more difficult for women to enter the workforce. Today, women are still expected to be primarily devoted to child-rearing. In general, Korean women leave the workforce once giving birth to care for their children, and may return once children are older to earn money to pay for their education. The massive economic growth the country has seen since the 60s has not translated into greater equity in the workplace or for female entrepreneurs. While globalization has benefited a small class of people, the middle class has shrunk and a large gender gap exists, with just over 45% of working-age South Korean women being employed, compared with 70% of men. Moreover, women get only 66% of what men earn in wages, which discourages many women from entering the workforce. Women's high educational attainment does not necessarily bring them labor market rewards, especially since most women's college education does not include any relevant business skills or training. Currently, Korea's social mobility through education has become more restricted, with education functioning more as a mechanism of class reproduction rather than social mobility. Although South Korea has created laws that require the government to support female entrepreneurs and extend financial subsidies to career-interested women who want to engage in some kind of work, women are still up against deeply entrenched stereotypes that tend to weaken gender equity and women protective laws. South Korea faces the largest wage gap among OECD countries, and 99% of female-owned businesses remain small or medium-sized. In Korea, female entrepreneurs experience more obstacles in securing startup capital. They also typically have little support from families and experience negative societal attitudes towards their involvement in entrepreneurial activities. In general, female entrepreneurs are relegated to specific industries such as food and beauty more than their male counterparts are. Married female entrepreneurs lack a supporting atmosphere from family members often, which can be critical of their success. This is consistent with previous studies that confirm that female entrepreneurs suffer more difficulties than their male counterparts. As part of the Gender GEDI Executive Report in 2013, it found that women find it difficult to strive in a business environment that have great regulatory burdens, which can force them to delay formation of their business. The challenge of securing financial capital because of this through formal investment channels mean that women often instead rely on either personal savings or family members in order to fund their new businesses. This presents a scenario where female entrepreneurs have to depend on the very family that does not support their business decisions in order to gain startup capital or money to expand their venture. For example, Romy Han, head of a home appliance company, had to mortgage her house and borrow money from her parents and in-laws to get her company off the ground. She recalls when she tried to apply for a loan, the banker's first question was, "So what kind of business did your husband bankrupt that you're fronting his business?" Although Korean President Park Geun-hye has recognized the need to support the entrepreneurial environment in 2013 when she passed the Creative Economic Policy, it has still failed to benefit women.
Background on Bangladesh. The history of Bangladesh's economy started in the 1960s, before it was liberated. Bangladesh back then was known as Eastern Pakistan. East Pakistan's economy grew by an average GDP 4%. Around one-fifth of that economy was destroyed during the Liberation War of 1971, and severe dislocation caused at that time left Bangladesh on a slower economic trajectory for following 2 decades. And then structure adjustment policy was introduced in Bangladesh in 1980s from Bretton Woods Institution under the support of World Bank and International Monetary Fund. This is, as a part of structure adjustment, Bangladesh's trade was liberalized in 1990. The trade liberalization means there's a relaxation and withdrawal of import quota restriction along the line of unification of exchange rate and devaluation of domestic currency. That led to huge increase in foreign direct investment, and then Bangladesh's economy was totally headed towards export-oriented industries. Bangladesh export industry is mostly dominated by textile industry. Currently, Bangladesh is the world's second largest textile industry, and at the same time, what we can see today is that Bangladesh's liberalization of trade and structure adjustment policies introduced there did not necessarily translate into women's empowerment. It ranked 121 in World Gender Development Index, calculated for 157 countries. We spoke about structure adjustment policy and trade liberalization. So now, when we look at structure adjustment policy and trade liberalization in the context of globalization and Bangladesh, we see that globalization's impact on women are numerous. First of all, the feminization of labor is happening. Feminization of labor means that because of increase in economic activity in the country, there are more opportunity for women to engage in economic activities, which otherwise not possible many years ago when there was no globalization. And then at the same time, there's a feminization of migration is happening. Feminization of migration means that when world economy globalized, and people in Bangladesh have easier access to go out of the country to seek a better paid job, and so the number of women going out is rapidly increasing to neighboring countries. But when we look at the migration pattern, the migration is very fast, but at the same time, when there's increased pressure and difficulties for women, and because of lack of state expenditure that was imposed by structure adjustment policy, women had to face numerous challenges in terms of managing their expenditure on daily basis. So we see that there are numerous impact of globalization of women, especially in Bangladesh, but the the burden of women has been increased in a different level. As we all know that globalization is always not negative. There are some positive aspect of globalization. So when we look at the positive impact of globalization, particularly in Bangladesh, what we see is that globalization actually brought employment opportunity for men and women, and also we see that there's a strong and more opportunity for entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship has become an important profession among women of Bangladesh today at various levels of society, both in urban and rural. The reason for interest vary according to different classes of society. And then because of the nature of entrepreneurship, there's an increased mobility and there is less restriction. The restriction of women's movement is declining very fast. So globalization definitely brings some very important social change in terms of gender equality and women's freedom and women's liberalization. When we look at from a policy perspective, what we realize is that because of strong force from outside, the government also need to change certain policies in regard to business, in regard to creating more opportunity for women uh, to be able to take opportunity in the economy. So of all, there are many positive impact of globalization, particularly on Bangladesh. We referred our study to a case study that is done on Asian women, the challenges that uh, women entrepreneurship in Asia face. So when we do the reading, what we realize is that there are certain important things that are not actually addressed in the reading. For instance, the reading did not specifically identify a problem that Asian women face in terms of setting up business, owning small enterprises or medium-level enterprises. The reading talks a general problem that women face in terms of business setup and entrepreneur setup. And another important thing that the author did not actually talk about it is that uh, talk about is the challenges that women have to face in large enterprises. We know that there are not many women who are in large enterprises, but there are few women who are in large enterprises. So the reading did not actually mention anything about women in large enterprises and the challenges that they had to undergo constantly, and the lack of support and lack of role models and stuff like that. The reading does not mention this.
Conclusions and takeaway points. Increasing GDP doesn't equally benefit men and women as we see, especially if national strategies for economic development target male-dominated industries. This was clearly illustrated by South Korea, which has seen massive growth of its economy since the 60s, a quadruple of average wealth, but has one of the world's lowest labor parities, 5 males to 1 female entrepreneurs. From our research, we also find that female entrepreneurs face unique barriers that are different from male entrepreneurs, in particular, such as low level of education, lack of capital and business networks, and of course, cultural and religious constraints. In addressing these issues, it's important to recognize that supporting women's participation in the workforce doesn't necessarily lead to more female entrepreneurs, especially since female entrepreneurs struggle with specific issues such as lack of startup capital, lack of female entrepreneurial role models, and the higher risk of starting one's own business. In fact, as opportunities for women increase through better educated and better paid employment opportunities, the participation of women as entrepreneurs in small and medium enterprises may decline, since most women are forced into entrepreneurship due to lack of options. It's therefore extremely important for governments and organizations as well to distinguish between female entrepreneurs who are pushed into entrepreneurship due to lack of options versus those that are pulled to it an opportunity. In particular, supporting female entrepreneurship should occur at every level and sector of business, and not just at the small and medium firms where 90% of women in Asia are related to. This can occur through creating a climate that supports women in a range of economic options and doesn't assume reproductive labor is the role is the sole responsibility of women. Increasing access to capital, business, education, and entrepreneurial networks for women and labor.
So after our case study, we come to conclude that there are several steps that we can do, or governments, or civil society, as well as private sectors can do, to improve the environment for women entrepreneur. First of all, there should be multi-level engagement. Multi-level engagement in the means of private and public come together to create an environment where women entrepreneurship can thrive. In many society, what we realize is that because of lack of awareness about women entrepreneurship, because of lack of role models, women face a lot of problem in setting a business. So there should be increase of awareness about the importance of women's entrepreneurship. At the same time, government should create an institution that supports women's entrepreneurship and also encourage women in terms of financial support and training, so that uh, more and more women can set up their business and be an entrepreneur. Finally, we are going to say that it's very important for government as well as private sector to create a market for women entrepreneur, so that within this ecosystem more and more women can join business when there's institutional support, there is a financial support, and there's a training and network. So in especially countries like Bangladesh, when there's not many women entrepreneurs, what they need is a lot of inspirations and a lot of support, as well as civil society engagement in the entrepreneurship. So better education should be provided, because better education opportunity encourage women's participation in decision making, and that also lead to vocational training. Vocational training can ultimately enable them to understand production process and production management. This is all what we have to say as our recommendations. Thank you.